All right, A pushers, are you ready for another knowledge pack episode of Mr. B History? I'm Mr. B, and this is Chapter 20 Notes, Becoming a World Power. It's all about that U.S. imperialism. Dates are 1898 to 1917. That's the Spanish-American War to U.S. entry into World War I. Our quotes today are, "We must obey our blood and occupy new markets and, if necessary, new lands." Senator Beveridge, 1898. "Our form of government, our traditions, our present interests, and our future welfare all forbid our entering upon a career of conquest." None other than Williams Jennings Bryan, 1998. Should be 1998, 1989. Seward, Alaska, and the French in Mexico. William H. Seward, Abraham Lincoln's Secretary of State and territorial expansionist. He helped prevent Britain and France from helping the Confederacy during the Civil War. He proceeded then to annex Midway Island in the Pacific. It's midway between the United States and East Asia. He also purchased Alaska from Russia. Everyone made fun of him. They said things like, "That's Seward's icebox," or "That's Seward's folly," until later they find tons of gold, and then later they find tons of oil. Turns out to be a really good investment. Seward also invoked the Monroe Doctrine to get France to withdraw its troops from Mexico after the Civil War, leading to Cinco de Mayo. The new imperialism. Imperialism, when a large, strong nation dominates a weaker nation, economically, militarily, and or culturally. Arguments for imperialism. You gotta have those raw materials for all your manufacturing, and you're running out of the raw materials you have in the United States. That's the conservation movement that we learned about in the previous chapter. Markets for industrial goods. We're making so much stuff, we gotta sell it to somebody besides just the people in the United States. We're looking for some markets. A safety valve for agrarian labor discontent. The farmers are angry, the factory workers are angry. Maybe some colonies might be the way to get them less upset. International Darwinism. It's like social Darwinism, except applied to nations. It's got that survival of the fittest. It will be a justification for why big, strong countries can beat up little, weaker nations. It's just because they're better adapted to survive. I don't even know what number we're on, but another argument is all the other countries are doing it. England and France and Britain, England and France, and Germany and Italy and all the other nations, large nations of the world, are colonizing the different parts of the world. In the United States, the argument is the United States should do it too, because everyone else is. That's usually a good idea. Missionaries argued that we needed to take over other countries to spread Christianity and civilization. A famous missionary would be Josiah Strong, who wrote a book, Our Present Crisis and Future something, whatever. Politicians like Theodore Roosevelt, he's going to be important. He's an expansionist and an imperialist. And then Alfred T. Mahan wrote a famous book about On the Influence of Sea Power. He was a Navy historian. So apparently historians like Frederick Jackson Turner are pretty influential. And so in his book, he argues that the United States needs naval bases to project our military power around the world. The imperialism was also encouraged by the popular press, also known as yellow journalism, who printed adventure stories about all the cool places in the world and how the United States should go there. Latin America, our closest neighbor, Latin America, our relationship with them, James Blaine and the Pan American Conference, 1889. First meeting of the United States and all the countries in South, Central, and South America. It's a Pan-American Conference. Pan means all, so All-American Conference. It lays the groundwork for future agreements. Grover Cleveland Olney, and the Monroe Doctrine. The U.S. helped settle border disputes between Venezuela and British Guiana. They were arguing about their borders. Venezuela said it was here. Guiana said it was there. Britain was agreeing with British Guiana. So the United States sides with Venezuela and threatens Britain with military force if they don't negotiate, negotiate. And Great Britain backs down. This becomes known from now on as a new British foreign policy, which is called patting the eagle's head. The eagle refers to the United States. Ever after this deal goes down, the relationship between the United States and Great Britain will go from enemies to being friends. The Spanish-American War. The highlight of this chapter is the Spanish-American War. It's a war for U.S. imperialism. The causes of the war are jingoism, an intense form of nationalism calling for an aggressive foreign policy. Aggressive means attack, attack, attack. The Cubans revolt. The Cubans are fighting for their independence against Spain, and so that's happening. Yellow journalism, the yellow press. They printed sensationalized story to sell papers. If it's in the newspaper, it has to be true. People reading about all sorts of atrocities that the Spanish were committing against the Cubans who were revolting, who they just wanted their freedom like the United States. And so that made Americans side with the Cubans against the evil Spaniards. The Delome letter in 1898, Spanish minister to the United States it's a diss letter about William McKinley. The letter is leaked to the press, and people are upset with saying, this is a slap to our national honor. How dare you make fun of our president? He's from Ohio. The sinking of the USS Maine. The final straw. So these are all underlying causes. The final straw, like the thing that set it all off, was the USS Maine, which was a boat that was parked off the coast of Cuba, Havana, Cuba, which is the capital of Cuba. It blows up. The yellow journalists blame it on Spain. Later on, they found out that it was probably an accident, but at the time, everyone just blamed it on Spain, and this prompted William McKinley to craft a letter to Congress to ask them for a declaration of war, because only Congress can declare war. So he says he's going to end the misery in Cuba, protect U.S. lives and property, make it better for business, and bring peace. The Teller Amendment says the U.S. promises to grant Cuba its independence. We're not fighting for territory. We're just trying to make the world a better place. Fighting the war. The actual war only lasted a few months. They called it a, quote, splendid little war. As soon as William McKinley gets this declaration of war, Theodore Roosevelt, the Assistant Secretary of the Navy, sends the U.S. fleet to take the Spanish colony of the Philippines, which is it's in East Asia. It's off the coast of China, which they do. Then they invade Cuba to drive out the Spaniards. More men die of disease and food poisoning than actual bullets. I think the number is something like only 500 people actually are killed in the actual fighting. Teddy Roosevelt, he resigns being Assistant Secretary of the Navy so that he can join an all-volunteer unit to go to Cuba. He calls himself the Rough Riders. And him and the Rough Riders and an African-American regiment take San Juan Hill, which is like one of the major significant battles of the war. And after that, it's over. The effects of the Spanish-American War. The Spanish War has lots of really, really important effects, including the annexation of Hawaii. Queen Liliuokalani is overthrown by Stanford Dole from Dole Pineapples, and Hawaii becomes part of the United States, eventually being a state. The Treaty of Paris of 1898, so another Treaty of Paris. According to this treaty, Spanish-American War ends. Cuba gets its independence. The U.S. gets Puerto Rico and Guam from Spain. The United States buys the Philippines from Spain for $20 million. So it's a win-win-win for the United States. The Philippine question. So then once we buy the Philippines, we're like, do we imperialize it and make it a colony? Question mark. The anti-imperialists, like William Jennings Bryan from our opening quote, says, no, that would be terrible. George Washington said no foreign tangling alliances. The American ideals of freedom, equality, and opportunity are against imperialism. But who cares about American ideals? Imperialism wins. Unfortunately for the Filipinos, they have to fight the United States until 1902 when they finally give up. Eventually, the United States will give Philippines back to the Filipinos, but that's not until after World War II. All right. More effects. Wow, that's a lot of effects. Insular cases. The Supreme Court gave Congress the power to decide whether territories of the United States got the rights of citizens, and the answer was Congress could decide. So if they wanted to give Filipinos rights, they could. They didn't. If they wanted to give Puerto Ricans rights, which eventually they did. Cuban and the Platt Amendment. 1901. Added to the Cuban Constitution, gave the U.S. the right to intervene in Cuban affairs, making Cuba a U.S. protectorate. It also gave the United States a permanent naval base at Guantanamo Bay, which we now use as a prison. Cuba was forbidden to sign treaties with other countries, so is it really that independent? The election of 1900. Teddy Roosevelt's war hero status got him to nomination to be William McKinley's vice president. Let's go. William McKinley defeats William Jennings Bryan again in a rematch of the 1896 election. But this time McKinley wins even more. The United States is recognized by other nations as a world power. Go USA, USA, USA. And then Americans are filled with national pride, nationalism, which reunites the nation emotionally after the Civil War. And students, A pushers, that brings us to the end of our first half of Chapter 20 notes. I hope you found it very informative. We have a little, I decided to have a little, a little contest of some sort. So thinking about synthesis and extending the argument, and comparing and contrasting this to other time periods in U.S. history. My idea was the first person who can put into the comments another time that the United States won a war and it led to an increase in nationalism that reunited the country. If you can explain that war and what factions did it unite, and how is it similar or different than the Spanish-American War and what happened, the nationalism after the Spanish-American War, I'll give you 1,000 Mr. B points. That's a lot of Mr. B points. So until then, I'm looking forward to see what you guys say in the comments. Make sure you like, subscribe, tell your friends. Especially if you learn stuff from this video. And until next time, this is Mr. B History signing out. Adios.